Now, one of the upsides of Bob Iger running the show over at Disney as CEO is that he is actually making a lot of big adjustments over at Lucasfilm, allowing a lot of great change to arise, and John and Dave, really being able to express whatever they want to in the upcoming Star Wars TV shows. There's a lot of things happening at the same exact time. However, one problem has a lot to do with Kathleen Kennedy and everything that has been going on over at, of course, the sets of The Acolyte and Skeleton Crew and more. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new and like this video to see future Star Wars updates. I'm also on Twitter at Mike01. I thank you also very much for the great and kind support. Now, yes, given that there is a lot of things, happening at the same exact time, we have, of course, John and Dave building the roadmap piece by piece that's going to be partially announced, mind you, at Celebration, and more to come at D23, and more events in the future. But what's really going on with Kathleen Kennedy as of late has a lot to do with how the board members of Disney are having a lot of problems with her, based on what she recently did with one or two of the upcoming projects. Now, we know already that Kathleen Kennedy has been creating nothing but trouble for Disney, a lot of revenue loss, a lot of setbacks and delays for Skeleton Crew and The Acolyte, mind you, and it's a never-ending vicious cycle. Unfortunately, that's how it is right now. So, that brings us to the latest. Now, recently Kathleen Kennedy made a couple of bad decisions on her end that Disney is very not happy with, and they have a lot of problems with the overall direction that she chose, and how it's going to have to do a lot with excluding George Lucas's philosophy of Star Wars and more. So, let's dive into the full details here about what's exactly going on. Now, on top of everything here, given that Lucasfilm is now aiming to improve its roadmap of Star Wars projects, both John and Dave are getting ready to make big changes to the lore and canon material. Now further, it's noted, however, that Kathleen Kennedy recently got herself into more issues from Disney after she recently made a sudden change to the Skeleton Crew series, not, of course, even in the closest to other projects. Now, this is said to be rooted to her changing both endings at last minute that are now being reshot at the same exact time, in order to fulfill the needs of the story to shift away from any references related to George Lucas, something that Disney higher-ups are giving Kathleen Kennedy lots of backlash over for making such a change, since they are making an effort with John and Dave to make things right for Lucas. Now further, Kennedy is said to have removed and erased several Easter eggs and references related to both the prequels and originals in Skeleton Crew and The Acolytes show, and that the endings of both series no longer have any Lucas connections, as they recently had. So let me just stop here for one moment before we get to the next big bit, is that obviously Kathleen Kennedy has some kind of personal problem with George Lucas that many people may never learn about in detail, but we already know that George has a grudge against her. This is why George did not attend the Rise of Skywalker world premiere, because of what she did with Episode 9 by deleting so many scenes that he actually advised and looked over and helped out with J.J. Abrams, and that only led to further complications between the two. So the problem is that she backstabbed George a third time. Initially, they both agreed that both Acolyte and Skeleton Crew were going to have a lot of references and Easter eggs and connections to the originals and to the prequels, right? For Skeleton Crew, it was going to be original trilogy lore, and for The Acolyte, it was going to be more prequel trilogy-esque connections. And a lot of that has been just vanquished by Kathleen Kennedy, and reducing George Lucas's involvement in those shows to practically zero. And that just goes to show you that she has no remorse in what she does. She's very much stubborn when it comes to what she believes in and what she thinks she is doing that is right, that is actually wrong. And it's just an endless, repeated cycle that I think Disney is just getting very tired of right now. This is why they want her out by August. And that's exactly why they're looking at Dana Brunetti, we talked about this, to be the new Lucasfilm president. He is currently the top candidate, thankfully. I think he'll be a great fit. He's the guy that made the movie Fanboys, which is a love letter to Star Wars fans, by the way. But anyways, the thing about Kathleen Kennedy here only continues to go down in a spiral further and only creates more problems. So let's tap into the next big part about this development, is that Bob Iger, alright, and the majority of the board are demanding Kennedy to reinstate the scenes. However, Kennedy's defense is that it did not fit creatively for her stories, and she is able to do what she wants with the story by contract. Further, many of the board members have even been voicing their negative opinions about Kathleen Kennedy to her directly, and are very tired of her adjustments to both shows, as it's giving Disney absolutely uncertain scenarios about the value of effectiveness of the series and how it will perform based on Kennedy's recent changes. So again, the Disney board, they're very much on edge because they're not quite sure how these shows are going to perform, how it's going to affect the roadmap or their current slate of Star Wars shows and stuff like that. To be perfectly honest, the people that know who's creating what is not going to be easily impacted by this, because what they really should be worried about are a lot of the casual fans that may not be informed on who's making which shows, right? Some people may think, well, if the Acolyte and Skeleton Crew are going to be horrible shows and they underperform terribly, that means the Mandalorian's going to perform horrible. You know, some fans may think like that when they don't really know who's creating, you know, which shows per se. You know, there's a lot of fans that I know personally that are casuals, and they don't really know that Mandalorian and Boba Fett are Favreau and Filoni driven projects, even Ahsoka. They just think it's, you know, driven by Disney and Lucasfilm, and that's all there is to it. Just the general thing. And though that is true, but you always have writers and directors that are creating those stories. So that's one thing a lot of fans, I think, need to be informed on. You know, who's creating what. It's why I like to really kind of put that out there many times as to how Kathleen Kennedy is the one leading those two shows, and the rest is all up to Favreau and Filoni, as well as Tony Gilroy. The other thing that I think, you know, is going to come out of this whole situation is that the Disney board is beginning to learn more about how the fans operate as a community, and they know exactly what they want, and they know their audience now. They know how they work, and they know what's going to work for the franchise moving ahead. So that's why they have little to no, you know, confidence, I guess you could say, in the Acolyte and Skeleton Crew for those various reasons. You know, they have a lot of worries about the performance of these shows and whether or not it's going to cost them subscribers on Disney+. All these thoughts are running through the Disney board members' minds right now, and it's just creating less focus on their aim for how they're going to market these things. They already dialed back on the marketing of Skeleton Crew and the Acolyte already, you know, keeping it at a bare minimum to save revenue and to not pour so much money into marketing. So there's that, but everything else, you know, is looking very bright by John and Dave. I mean, I tell you, it's not over-exaggeration. I think what they are doing is truly going to reshape the franchise. So anyways, guys, fill me in below in the comments what you guys have to say about all of this. And if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel. I thank you all so very much for the kind support, and I'll catch you guys next time.
From night to moon, we hear them moans again.